Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game, Vivid Memories, designed by Matthew Dunstan and Brett J. Gilbert, and published by Floodgate Games, who helped sponsor this video. The best memories are worth saving, and that's what you'll be doing here as you reflect on important childhood memories, storing them in your mind to shape the person you'll go on to become. Will it be enough to help you achieve your life's goals? It's time to find out, so join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, give each player one of these boards and a player aid. In this video, we'll pretend we have 2 players. Nearby, set this score track, placing this round marker onto the first space of the round track at the bottom. Then have each player pick a matching set of score markers from all the ones included, putting one onto the 0 space of the score track, setting the other matching one by your board as a reminder of which scoring marker is yours. The tiles with this back are the aspiration tiles, which you shuffle, giving 1 to each player. You can examine your own, but keep it a secret from the other players and return the rest unseen back to the box. Now find these moment tiles. They have 2 sides, an action side and a scoring side. The scoring side will show something you're imagining, while the action side shows the memory of that time from your childhood. Also notice the symbol here on the bottom of the scoring side. It's shown on the action side as well, but faded and off to the side. And I'm explaining this because the tiles should be shuffled into a stack with the action side face up. You then set this stack nearby for use later. Now find the bag and these fragment tokens, dividing them into their 5 different colors, and from each color, you'll add a certain number of them to the bag based on the number of players. You'll find this detailed on your player aid. 11 fragments of each color in a 2-player game, 17 of each color with 3 players, and 20 of each in a 4-player game. Once you have the correct number in the bag, give it a good mix and set the leftovers in a supply nearby. Finally, assign this start player tile to the person who can recall their earliest positive memory, or just pick someone randomly. And that's the setup. In Vivid Memories, you'll be gathering fragments of memories from your childhood to create patterns on your board in order to match various scoring conditions while working to fulfill your secret aspiration. Have the most points by the end, and you win. The game is played over 3 rounds, and each round is broken into 4 phases, starting with the prepare phase. Here, create what is known as the moment line by drawing moment tiles from the stack equal to the number of players plus 2. So in our 2-player game, we'll have 4 tiles in the line. You then draw a number of random tokens from the bag to place on each tile. 4 per tile in a 2-player game, or 5 per tile if you have 3 or 4 players. So it would look something like this in our 2-player game. Again, you'll find reminders of this detailed here on your player aid. The fragments have symbols on them, and these are just used to help players who might have difficulty distinguishing the colors. In the rare event that your bag is empty when you would need to draw more fragments, just add 1 of each color from the supply that we had set aside earlier and then keep drawing as necessary. Okay, so that's the prepare phase. Next we have the remember phase. Here, players will take turns in clockwise order going around and around the table, starting with the person holding this first player token. On your turn, you'll examine the moment line and pick one of the tiles on either end of it. Once you've made your choice, you have 3 options. You can either collect any 1 fragment from the tile, so I could take any one of these, or you may choose to collect 2 fragments if they're both the same color, so I could take these 2 blue ones. Or you can take exactly 3 fragments as long as they're all different. So I could take this blue, green, and yellow one. The catch is that you must take the fragments from only a single moment tile, and it has to be a tile from one of the ends. After you make your choice and collect the fragments, the next player goes. Let's say the next person is going. If while taking fragments you empty a tile, you may keep collecting from the adjacent moment tile. For example, let's say the player chose this end and took this blue fragment. They could then take the blue fragment from this tile, as that would be 2 pieces of the same color, or they could take this blue one and maybe this purple and yellow one, since that's 3 different colors, which is allowed. If when taking fragments you cause a tile to be completely emptied, you then collect it. Any tile you collect you set near your board with its action side still face up. Whether you emptied a tile or not, as soon as you take any fragments, whether you collected 1, 2, or 3, you must immediately add the ones you took to exactly one empty hex on your board. The arrangement of fragments within a space doesn't matter, so place them as you like. The important thing is that all of the fragments you just took must go into a single empty hex space. And we'll see why you might pick a particular space a little later. This would normally end your turn unless you only took a single fragment on your turn. When you do this, after adding it to your board, you perform a special Rewire action. Rewiring lets you pick any hex space of your board, which could include the space you just added fragments to, but it doesn't have to. And then you either move any number of fragments from that space to adjacent spaces. So, for example, if I picked this space here, I could move one or both of these pieces into adjacent spaces. Or instead, when rewiring, you can move any number of fragments from adjacent spaces into the space you picked. So let's say I was rewiring and I picked this space. I could then move this piece in there if I wanted to, and if I wanted to bring another one in, I could, maybe from this space. You can only perform one of these options though. You can't do a combination of both. You're either going to pick one space and move pieces out of it, or pick one space and move pieces into it. And remember, a hex space can never have more than 3 fragments. With rewiring understood, remember I said, when you take fragments from a tile during your turn, no matter how many you took, you must place all of them into one single empty hex space on your board. Now, in very rare cases later in the game, you may not have any empty hex spaces left. In that situation, you don't get to collect any new fragments at all. Instead, you must perform a rewire action on your turn in order to create an empty hex, and then your turn just ends. So, during the remember phase, you either take one fragment and get to rewire if you want to, or you can take 2 matching fragments, or 3 different fragments. Also, if you emptied a moment tile during this process, you collect it. Then the next player goes, and around the table you'll go like this until eventually a player takes the final fragment and moment tile from the moment line. You then give the first player token to whoever is seated to that player's left, which could be the person who already has it. But the point is that during the next round, that person will be the new first player to go. For now though, it's time to move on to the reflect phase. And all the players perform this phase at the same time. Here, each person looks at these 4 areas of their board known as their memory bank slots. These will show an action you'll be able to perform once during this phase. We'll discuss them in a moment, but first, if you collected any moment tiles during the last phase, you must add as many of them as possible to the various slots. You decide which slots to fill, but must place every tile you have. When you're done, if you have any tiles left over, which would be possible in games with more players, you return those to the box. Any slot you cover up will block the action that you've covered, but you then gain access to the action printed on the tile instead. So if I placed my tiles like this, I'd have access to these 1, 2, 3, 4 actions. Or if I'd collected no tiles, I'd have access to these 4 actions. Whichever 4 actions you have, you now perform each of them one time in any order you choose. So let's first go through the ones shown on your board. This action allows you to take any 2 fragments from a single hex on your board and return them to the supply, putting any one fragment of your choice from the supply back into that space. And it could even be a fragment that was the same color as one of the ones that you got rid of. With this action, you take a fragment at random from the bag and put it onto an empty hex space of the board. If the bag is empty, you can't take this action. This action here lets you move one fragment from one hex to any adjacent one. But remember, with this action, or any other one, you can never have more than 3 fragments in a single hex space at any point in the game. With this action, you swap one of your fragments in a hex space with a fragment from an adjacent hex space, maybe moving this one here and that one there. And those are the basic actions on your board. So now let's take a look at the 2 types of actions you might find on the moment tiles. This tile action simply means that you take a fragment of its color from the supply and add it to any empty hex space of your board. And after you resolve the action on the tile, you flip that tile upside down. This type of tile action requires you to remove a fragment from a hex of the specific color shown here, and then you add these two specific fragments to that very same space. So I might put these in here like this. Now, if you use this action on a space that already contained 3 fragments, then after you remove one, you'll only have space for one more to go back into it. So you would just pick either one of the 2 types shown. Either way, with the action over, you then flip the tile face down. And those are all the actions, and you'll find reminders for how they work right here on the other side of your player aid. So during this phase, you'll normally have 4 actions you can perform, though as we'll see, sometimes you might have less. And you can resolve each of your actions once in any order. And players don't have to take turns here. Just take your actions as you like. The only exception would be if several players wanted a certain color from the supply and that color is running low. In that case, players should instead perform actions one at a time in order, beginning with the start player and then going clockwise. Also, if you need a little help remembering which actions you've taken so far, just place one of the unused scoring markers on an action after you've resolved it. But make sure you clear them away at the end of this phase. The main thing to remember is that if you perform the action on a moment tile, you must flip it over. Okay, once everyone has finished their actions, it's time for the reward phase. Here, you look at each moment tile in your memory bank slots that has its scoring side face up. So you would ignore any with their action sides still face up because you didn't use that action in the last phase. One type of scoring symbol you'll see will show 2 different fragment tokens. And these will score you 4 points for each hex space on your board that contains those 2 fragments and no third piece with them. So like this one that we see here. If the moment tile shows 3 different fragments, then you score 6 points for each of your spaces that has those matching tokens. So looking at our entire board, this scoring tile will give us 4 points for this hex, and this scoring tile will give us 6 points for each of these hexes for a total of 12. And if you ever happen to have 2 tiles that score the same types of hexes, both of them give you points for each match. So we'd score 12 points for this tile and another 12 points for this one. Just know that if you're able to score even a single time with the tile you have, then you must. You can't save a tile to score later. And once a tile is used for scoring, you then take it off of your board and just set it beside it. Tiles you've scored are considered cherished memories, and they may score you additional points at the end of the game, as we'll see. I should mention, anytime you score points in the game, you move your marker along this track the related number of spaces. If you ever score more than 99 points, just flip your token over to the 100 side and keep counting from the beginning again. So this means I have 107 points. If you're not able to score a tile at least once, let's say, for example, I did not have this combination of fragments in any of the spaces of my hex board, then this tile will stay on your board up here, but this means next round I'll have 1 fewer action to take, as the action underneath is covered, and this tile no longer shows an action on the visible side. But that's just one way of scoring. Now you score what are known as your threads. On the outside edge of your board, you might have noticed these fragment-shaped spaces. These are known as core memory slots. You now check to see if you've connected one of these core memory slots to any other core memory slot of the same color by tracing a line through hex spaces that contain at least 1 fragment of the same color. Here, let me show you an example. This is a green core memory. Beside it, we have a green fragment, and another green fragment here. And if I keep going, I have an unbroken line of these all the way to this green core memory. This is known as a thread. You may even have a thread that connects more than 1 matching core memory at a time. See, this branches and then comes over here and connects also to this green core memory. If you connect at least 2 core memories and at least one of them is empty, you must now score the thread. And this will give you a number of points equal to the number of hex spaces that the thread takes up, multiplied by the number of empty core memory slots it connects to. So here, this thread takes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spaces. And it connects to 1, 2, 3 different core memory slots. That's 9 times 3, or 27 points. When counting hexes, you never have to count the shortest path, but you can't backtrack and count a hex more than once. After you score a thread, you then move one of the fragment tokens you counted from each end of the thread into the matching empty core memory slot you connected it to. If there are ever two hexes directly adjacent to the related slot, like we see here, you pick which one to take the fragment from. In the future, when you're checking threads, you no longer count slots that are already filled in when you're doing that score multiplier. For example, if our board looked like this, I have a thread connecting these two already filled in slots and this empty one over here. Now, since only one of the slots is open, I will multiply the total number of hexes in the thread by just one. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces times 1 for 7 points. And then I would move this fragment into this slot. If later in the game you have no empty slots for a particular color, that color can no longer score you points for threads. There's one more way to score at the end of the round, and that is with our core memories. You now look once again at the core memory slots around the outside edge of the board. Notice how there's clusters of just 1, 2, and sometimes 3 together. If you have all the spaces within a cluster filled in, you now score the points showing beside it. For example, in a case like this, we'd score 4 points. And that means at the end of the next round, when we score core memories again, we'd earn this 4 points again. So the earlier you fill these in, the more times you can score them during the game. And that's how you score all your rewards at the end of the round. And you'll find these all listed here on your player aid. With the round over, you now move this marker to the next space and begin a new round. On the other hand, if the marker is already here when you get to the end of the round, the game is over and you have one last bit of scoring to do. Every player should now reveal the aspiration tile they were given at the start of the game, and this will show one of the fragment colors. You now score 1 point for every fragment of that color in your hex spaces. So visible on screen, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 points worth of those fragments. But of course, make sure you check your entire board. You then score 2 points for each matching fragment in your core memory slots. So we can see one of those here, that would be 2 points. And then you get 5 points for each cherished memory beside your board that shows that colored fragment as one of the fragments in its scoring icon. So when you get this tile at the beginning of the game, you'll want to keep it in mind as you fill up your board. Either way, the player who now has the most total points wins. If there's a tie, the tied player who scored the most points from their aspiration tile wins. And if there's still a tie, the tie is broken in favor of the player furthest from the person who was the start player at the beginning of the final round. There are also rules if you'd like to try a solo variant of this game, which you can find by following the QR code here on the back of the rulebook, but those rules I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Vivid Memories. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get a notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.